years prior and ignored them. That news should make Jamie Dimon's scheduled testimony at the Senate Banking Committee tomorrow very interesting. We also learned today that since the '08 crash, J.P. Morgan has received nearly $400 billion in zero-interest federal loans on printed money from you and me, effectively, that was revealed in government records made public for the first time ever, thanks to our first guest today, Senator Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont. Along the way, Jamie Dimon, in most recent years, has paid himself into the tens of millions of dollars, Senator. Meanwhile, the average American family's value from 2007 to 2010 has gone down 40%. If you were on the committee before the CEO of J.P. Morgan tomorrow, what would your first question be?
My first question would be, haven't you learned anything from what Wall Street did 4 years ago, where your recklessness and your greed drove this country into a terrible, terrible recession? Are you still the world's largest gambling casino? Why don't you start investing in the productive economy, create jobs, rather than just enrich yourself?
And I suspect he would respond to you by saying we have conceived, going back to Bill Clinton and Bob Rubin and the founding of the euro, the world's most efficient distributed risk network, Senator, and it is highly intact, highly complex, and if anything, the regulations of people like Washington, D.C. are making it more difficult for us to do this than not. That would be a characterization, would you not say, of a likely response from Jamie?
I think that's pretty much what he would say. And I think our answer is that your highly complicated gambling efforts are not creating jobs in America. We need a fundamental change in the culture of Wall Street so that you are investing in the productive economy, helping us grow jobs, produce products, services, and we don't need any more of these complicated gambling procedures. The second point that I would make on that committee, and I'm not on the banking committee, is to say to him, you were on the New York Fed during the financial crisis, and your company, J.P. Morgan Chase, received $380 billion in very low-interest loans. Don't you perceive that as a conflict of interest? Why do you think that people representing the banking industry should be on the New York Fed and the other regional Feds when the function of the Feds, among other things, is to regulate the financial institutions?
And I mean, I want to come back to the revision of the opportunity-seeking intent of Wall Street. It's supposed to be an opportunity-seeking investment culture, an opportunity to invest and develop. It's become obviously a risk-taking and gambling culture. I want to come back to that. But you really just hit on something, which is you don't have to understand gambling and opportunity-seeking and risk derivatives to understand conflict of interest, which is you got the same guy who's basically paying himself out, using taxpayer money, in charge of supervising himself. A kindergartner could tell you that's going to lead to disaster.
Dylan, I would think so. But let's be clear. This is not just Jamie Dimon. You got 17, according to the GAO, who at my request did a study of the conflicts of interest at the Fed. You have 17 other individuals, past and present members of Feds, who collectively, 18 of them collectively, their financial institutions received $4 trillion in very low-interest loans during the bailout period. So, again, if this is not the fox guarding the henhouse, then I don't know what it is.
So let's come to the root of the issue. We've been at this for a few years. Senator, you know, obviously I'm going to conclude this in a week from Friday, and we've sort of been at this a while. The unresolved portion of all this, going back to when I left CNBC in 2008, continues to be the same thing it was when I left, Senator, which is that while you can acknowledge, everybody can acknowledge the risk of the gambling complexity, you see the symptoms of it with Corzine and Jamie Dimon and on and on, and it's clear that the need to break up the banks and revise all these issues is intact. We've done it before, we all know, but no one wants to do it because it is incredibly disruptive to the current banks. It is incredibly disruptive to the short-term economic flow of money. It is incredibly disruptive to a lot of the current status, and no one seems to be able to walk into the room with that bomb, Senator, and disassemble it without having it go off.
Dylan, in all due respect, I don't agree with you. I think that when you have 6 financial institutions in this country that have assets equivalent to 2/3 of the GDP of the United States, that produce half of the mortgages, 2/3 of the credit cards, that have unbelievable political power, I think it is a no-brainer to say that for the sake of our economy, productive economy, and in order to prevent another too big to fail, you have got to break these banks up. The reason that you're not doing that, you're not seeing that action here in Congress, is simply having to do with the enormous power of Wall Street. And if you want to stand up to these guys, they're going to go get you. There are going to be a whole lot of television ads coming at you back home. They have all kinds of lobbyists here on Capitol Hill. So that's the issue.
The complexity argument, as far as you're concerned, is a smokescreen. The real problem is the financial control of the banks over Washington. We could get through the complexity problem if you could get through the money. Okay.
Yes.
I appreciate that. I have no reason to dispute that. It makes a tremendous amount of sense. One more question, which really ties to this whole thing. As you know, in 1998, 1999, 2000, Commodity Futures Modernization Act, Glass-Steagall repeal, everybody's seen the Frontline documentary at this point. They've seen The Inside Job. They've read the books. They're more educated. What people may not realize is that the exact same people who conceived of that for the United States also conceived of the Eurozone. It is the exact same birthplace that is from that Rubin, Greenspan, Clinton, Sandy Weil period, which was, again, I believe, whether it was malicious or not, you'll never know, but it was an experiment that has clearly failed, okay? And the bill for that experiment is coming due. There'll be billions of dollars. Right now, the bill is being paid by the Southern European poor people who are suffering without jobs. That's who's currently paying the bill. Right now, there's three basically rich uncles that are in play to pay this bill off. The first rich uncle, obviously, is the ECB and Draghi. Draghi's been keeping this thing running. He basically is saying, I can't keep doing this. Then you have the New York Fed, the Washington, D.C. They don't want to pay for it, which leaves you with Angela Merkel and the Bavarians and the Christian Democrats and the entire German economy, which by my measure has been the most inspiring, most efficient, most well-run, locally driven, distributed power. Why on earth should the Germans pay the bill for Bob Rubin and Alan Greenspan's experiment just because they happen to run in a high-efficiency power generation facility?
Well, Dylan, I think that is a fair question. And I think also, by the way, what you're seeing in Europe, you're seeing it in France, you're seeing it in Germany, you're seeing it in Greece, is that ordinary people who have been terribly hard hit by this recession, unemployment off the wall, cutbacks in pensions and health care, ordinary people are saying, hey, maybe it's time to reverse this austerity thing. Let's see austerity for the big banks and the wealthiest people in our countries and in Europe and in the world, and not just working people.
But let's be honest about what that word means for the big banks in the world. What that means is a global debt restructuring. What austerity for them is a global debt restructuring where you don't restructure at the expense of the pension holder, but you restructure at the expense of the sovereign debt holder and or the second lien holder, which I know is language that's not widely sort of chattered about in political circles or in media circles. But the fact of the matter is, I know you understand it, Senator, and you either restructure at the expense of the people like we're doing in Greece, or you restructure at the expense of the banks. And that's been done, but it's only been done after war, sir.
Well, here's where you are. You are really at a pivotal moment, in my view, in modern world history. And we have got to deal with these issues. In our country, we have an incredibly unfair and unequal distribution of wealth and income, and you're having that increasingly all over the world. And what ordinary people are saying, something has got to happen, but you can't keep beating up on working families who have already seen a significant decline in their standard of living. Somebody else is going to have to pay for this, and it can't be just the average person.
Yeah. Listen, obviously you have a long career and a proud voice. I was proud to be able to learn from you over the past few years, Senator, if I don't get a chance to talk to you again.
Well, Dylan, congratulations for all the great work you have done. We'll miss you, and I'll see you in another venue, I'm sure.
Yes, well, cable news it won't be, but television for sure. Cable news, I think, is about had enough of me and me of it, but we'll do some TV for sure, maybe in a broad. Well, we got to